Hello, friends. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whichever time zone you are viewing from. Welcome again to our YouTube channel, EdTech Society All Learners. Today, we are going to cover one of the interesting topic, I would say, and which is very crucial and important from both building your concept in enterprise architecture as well as to your exam perspective as well. Now, the topic is architecture view and viewpoints. If you remember, or if you're following our videos, you know that we have uh, created one of the videos about architecture vision, and followed by we are planning to create other videos for phase B, C, D, where we will be creating business architecture, technology, and other architecture related topics. Now, architecture view and viewpoints are very relevant and to be created and to be produced during this phase A vision phase, as well as it is being updated and refined and finalized during the phase B, C, D, those architecture phases. So as I'm trying to explain, the architecture view and viewpoints are very crucial and important, which are being started or being created or being produced during your phase A architecture vision phase, and then eventually it's being updated and refined and finalized during the next phases like B, C, and D. So the question is that what is architecture view and what is a architecture viewpoint? And honestly, this view and viewpoints seems to be very confusing because they are from a kind of a, I would say, terminology wise, it's pretty similar. And if we go and try to read those TOGAF open group documents or the made study materials, you have detailed information about view and viewpoint. But I I believe, and with our experience, we have seen it is pretty confusing, and people kind of mixed up, and people get confused what exactly is view and what is viewpoint and how those two things are different. So that's why in today's session, our intent is kind of try to explain in a very simple language to you, and so that you will understand the concept once and you should not forget it throughout your career, professional life, and definitely during the exam. So we'll start with the example first. And I believe you might have seen, if you have already studied in an open group example like documents also, you might face the similar kind of example somewhere else as well. But we believe this is one of the good example which describes the detailed, I think I would say, definition of the what is view and viewpoint and how those are different and all different aspects. So as you can see in my screen, we are sharing here the simple airport system. Now, there are two pictures. On my left, the first picture is the kind of a cockpit view where the pilot and the co-pilot is sitting there, and they are seeing a particular view from the airplane cockpit or the flight cockpit. And there they can see the different controls, they can see the runway, the other aeroplanes or flights, and related details. So they have a particular view. Whereas you can see on the right hand side of me, there is a view of the air control traffic team who might have a totally different view because they are looking at overall airport systems through their screens, uh, the weather, temperature, other air flights, timings, their situation, status, the departing flight, the arriving flight, all those details. So you can think in this simple airport system, the pilot on the left hand side and the co-pilot, they are the one of the stakeholders, and on the other hand, these guys, the airport traffic controller, are the other group of stakeholders. Now both of them have a different viewpoints because they are looking from different perspectives or different needs. The kind of this your airport, the pilots, they have different need or the different requirements because they need to know what is the runway status, whether it's a empty one, whether it's ready to fly, their airport, their airplane or the flight situation, the fuel and all those, and particular to flight condition, all these things are very relevant to them. So from their viewpoint, they have this particular view as you can see in the screen with the relevant information. Whereas the traffic controllers on the ground who are controlling and maintaining all the traffics, all the flights in the overall airport system, they have a different view, they have a different perspective, they have a different requirements. So that means their these stakeholders business need or viewpoints, like views are different. So if I try to explain you guys, as you can see, both the stakeholders are viewing the system, or maybe from the outside of the system you can have a different viewpoints based on the perspective, based on the need, based on the requirement, based on the situation, and how the user is going to handle the application. So they will have a different viewpoint, and from that viewpoint, they we can create a view. Now this is a kind of a flight view from inside of the cockpit. This is another view from the airport traffic control office, or somewhat we can call it. So but both these views are not the total system or the entire airport system. But if we try to create multiple views based on the input or the business need of the stakeholders, we would be able to create these views, and those views at a large in the consolidated manner will create the overall system, the end-to-end system. In this case, this is the simple airport system will be created uh, by kind of joining this or collaborating both these pictures or both these views. So you understand, these are the views as an architecture we are supposed to create from the different viewpoints the stakeholders are having. So that's the concept of view and viewpoint. Now, architecture views provide a meaningful representation of the system as we have written here, and you can see it, while viewpoints guide how those views are created and interpreted. Exactly what I just explained. So TOGAF emphasizes using these concepts to align architecture with organizational goals and address stakeholder needs. So this is the example of view and viewpoint. If I go to kind of a next slide, this is again I thought of give you a kind of a one more I would say, pictorial view. And this is a famous tale of six blinds and elephant, where those six blind people are trying to kind of touch and feel the different body parts of an elephant, and based on their understanding, based on their need, or based on their knowledge, they are explaining a different body parts of elephant with their known object. Because as we all know, none of these blind people are able to see the elephant. That means the overall system or the overall end-to-end system, they are not able to see it. But individual stakeholders, if we can think of each of these blind people as the stakeholder, they are explaining their particular business need or their viewpoint. And you might see sometimes the viewpoints are not correct or maybe not relevant, but yeah, that's not our concern, at least in relation with this view and viewpoint concept. But here, as you can see, one blind people thinking this teeth is a spear, the other one is thinking this the ears are like a fan, the trunk they felt it like a snake, maybe the legs are like a tree for them, the body is like a wall, and the tail is a rope. So basically, it's a viewpoint for every people or the every stakeholder. They have a different viewpoint, and those viewpoints will help the architects, or architects should create the views considering one or more viewpoints of one or more stakeholders. And then finally, once we kind of collate or join all those views, you will get the end-to-end system or the application. And definitely, please don't quote me that I'm calling the stakeholders as a blind people. It's just a metaphor. Okay, so yeah, let's move into the next part of this slide or this session, where we'll go to the boring part of the definition. So far we discussed with the examples, and I hope, I believe you guys now understand what is a view and what is a viewpoint from an architecture point of view. Okay, so what is the architecture view? If I go by the kind of a definition, or rather kind of a summarized details, that an architecture view represents a system from the perspective of a specific set of concerns. So this is very important, that it represents a system from perspective of specific set of concerns. It's essentially what you see when you look at the system. So you can think of the one or more stakeholders specific set of concerns uh, will be kind of clubbed, and it can represent the architecture view. Each view consists of one or more architecture models which provide simplified and abstract representation of the subject matter. Definitely, it's a kind of a model which will provide you a abstract relationship of the subject matter. And think of an architecture view as a lens through which you examine different aspects of architecture, addressing the concern of various stakeholders. So yeah, what we discuss, it's kind of a summarized manner. It's been written in these 3 points. Similarly, the viewpoint or architecture viewpoint, what is it? So as we discussed and explained, an architecture viewpoint is the vantage point or perspective from which you are looking at the system. It determines what you see in an architecture view. So it's very important the stakeholder, or the particular stakeholder or the group of stakeholders, from which perspective they are looking at the system. Whether you can think of it's a simple way, maybe it's an end user, maybe any other group of user, maybe upstream, downstream, and different stakeholders in the application or the group of applications or the business process. So different stakeholders have their different needs, different uh, point of view, different perspective. So from their viewpoint, uh, it will be different from the other stakeholders, and those viewpoints will help you to create the view. And viewpoints are generic and can be stored in libraries for reuse. So this is a very important statement, and if you can, if I try to help you to remember that this particular statement, sometimes we get in the foundation exams, that whether which part is a reusable artifact, and the viewpoints are the answer, not the view. Okay, please do remember this point. While an architecture view is always specific to the architecture it represents, because as now you understand that architecture view is always specific to architecture, but the viewpoints can be generic, it's reusable, and it can be stored in the libraries. Okay, so yep, this is very important. Next, essentially a viewpoint frames the concern from stakeholders and establishes convention for creating views. Yep. So, so these are the points, and very important from a definition perspective as well as a conceptual perspective, as I mentioned. And some of these points are very important, and which may come to your exam and for both foundation and practitioner perspective. Okay, so this is actually one other, I would say, important diagrammatic view provided by the open group, and where it talks about the relationship between the stakeholder concerns, view and viewpoints, and their interrelationship. And this is a at first go you might think of this is a very complex diagram, but believe me, it's not that complex. It's just a different conceptual blocks like the stakeholder, concern, view, and viewpoints, and how they are interconnected, how they are related, uh, how they are kind of impacting or kind of connected to one another. That is being explained or described in this particular diagram. It's very easy, and I am not going to suggest that you have to memorize this diagram honestly, but some of these points are very important and helpful for both your concept as well as your exam. So I'll just quickly go through the points and then I'll show you the diagram. That in general, a view is defined as a part of an architecture description that addresses a set of related concerns and is tailored for specific stakeholders. So that is the point number one. Next, an architecture view addresses one or more of the concerns held by a stakeholder of the system. So if I try to relate it, though I told that I'll go through it one by one, but maybe it will be easy for you guys to understand if I relate or show this statement in the diagram directly. So yep, I believe that would be better. Like as you can see, as an architecture view addresses one or more of the concerns held by the stakeholder. So it is kind of establishing the relation between the concern and architecture view. And as you can see, the architecture view addresses, it's a 1:1 relationship, addresses the concern of the stakeholders. So first it is mapping between the architecture description, system of interest, stakeholder concern, and architecture view and viewpoint. So as you can see, the next one is architecture view expresses the architecture of the system of interest in accordance with an architecture viewpoint. So architecture view expresses the architecture of the system of interest. So as you can see, the system of interest is exhibits the architecture. Similarly, an architecture viewpoint frames one or more concern, and a concern can be framed by more than one viewpoint. So as you can see here in the diagram, concerns are framed by one or more architecture viewpoints. So that's what this particular relationship is established with. Now, between the viewpoint and a view, you can see a view is governed by its viewpoint. So as you can see, architecture viewpoint governs the architecture view. So that's the relationship is between 1:1, and architecture viewpoint governs the view. Similarly, view addresses one or more concerns. Then concerns, like you can see, stakeholder has one or more concern, or one or more stakeholders might have one or more concerns. Similarly, stakeholders has interest in system or system of interest. That is a kind of a relation. Similarly, as it was mentioned, that system of interest exhibits architecture. Architecture description identifies the stakeholder. It identifies the concerns. So these are the kind of a interrelated dependency, or the relationship is being defined and displayed in this diagram. So I would say primarily you try to remember these 2-3 points, like the architecture view addresses concern, uh, architecture viewpoint frames concern, and architecture viewpoint governs architecture view. So these 2-3 points are very important, and you may get a question in a exam as well. And definitely it's a very useful diagram to build and brush up your concept as well. Okay, moving on, the different types of architecture views. So we talked about the view and viewpoint. So as we talked that views from during the phase A, architecture vision phase, the enterprise architects help to create the views from the different stakeholder viewpoints, and with consolidating these views they create the overall system. Now the views can be different for the different needs, different phases, and for different customer or the different stakeholder level. So it can be a business architecture, it can be data architecture, it can be technology architecture, security, and many other form of architecture views can be created. And maybe because some stakeholders are more interested in business architectures, the data related people are interested in data architecture. So whichever architecture is needed, based on that you create it at different phases of the life cycle. Now the level of views can be also different, it can be conceptual, contextual, logical, and physical. And just to give you a kind of a update that we are going to discuss these different labels actually in another video, but just to give you a glimpse that architecture views can be differentiated based on this kind of a group of levels that we mentioned here. Okay, so what we learned today, or what we understood. So in summary, if I just quickly recap in couple of 3-4 points, what is the architecture view and viewpoint? So view is simply addresses a stakeholder concern about an architecture. So this is the simplest way of describing what is the architecture view, and very important as I mentioned for our exam perspective as well. Now, a representation of enterprise architect landscape that addresses a set of stakeholders' concern, either describe how the architecture addresses the concern or demonstrate how the associate requirements are met. So that is basically the stakeholder concern and how it is being addressing uh, the view and viewpoint. Now, each viewpoint should identify the concern, the stakeholders, how the view should be constructed, and the information required to address the question. So, viewpoint help you identify the concern, the stakeholders, the relevant information, how to construct the and address the question, because that will help the enterprise architect and the stakeholders to create the view, and from that view they can create the end-to-end system. So that's the concept of view and viewpoint. Okay, so yeah, uh, so this is a kind of a YouTube channel we are kind of maintaining and managing with help of my friend and colleague Arjit Chaudhary and myself Shayan Guchait. Try to give you these insights and informations in our channel EdTech Society All Learners. So please do like our channel, subscribe, and provide your feedback. We'll be very happy to address any of your questions, queries, or any concerns you may have. Thank you and have a good day.